Hey everyone, Ben here with a first look at AMS2 version 1.4 point something. And in this video you're going to see mechanical failures, AI mistakes, a new damage model, working tyre temperatures, the day and night cycle, real weather data, rear wheel drive cars and front wheel drive cars, vintage and modern content, all across 4 different race scenarios. That is if you resist the temptation to skip ahead and if you make sure you stick around to the end. Now this update has been promoted by Razer as a really significant one, consolidating the many improvements and tweaks made to physics, handling and force feedback across 2022 and adding some new features as well. I can't possibly give you a thorough review of AMS2, the game is too big with too much content and I simply don't have the time to play it all. But in my time with the game over the last week, I've tried to take on a variety of different racing cars, tracks and styles, as well as environmental conditions to come to a reasonable take on the state of the sim. We're beginning then with some 80s Formula 1 action at Brands Hatch in the McLaren MP4 1C. Alright then, let's start with how this car feels and handles. Unsurprisingly, it gives you a huge amount of power and a real sense of exhilaration at top speed. I've got to say, it feels fairly authentic to me in terms of giving you that snappy oversteer if you get too enthusiastic with the throttle pedal. It is pretty accessible though, you can catch those slides, unlike this AI driver who didn't catch that slide heading into the left-hander. So there's an example of some AI mistakes under pressure. It looks a little bit canned, a little bit scripted at the moment, but definitely something for Razer to build on, and very nice to see that kind of unpredictability with the AI drivers that you're up against. You might have seen some dust being kicked up by the McLaren up ahead there, and again there through Paddock Hill Bend. That's a bit of an issue with cars running wide and dipping their tyres, a little bit like an iRacing esports driver. That needs to be tidied up, but that puff of smoke isn't dirt, that is an engine failure from one of the AI drivers as well. That is new for this build, it's part of the mechanical damage that's been introduced and is very cool to see as well, I must say. We do need to see some yellow flags brought out for this kind of thing. One lap later, this car is still stranded and on fire to the left-hand side of the track. So again, room to build on that feature being integrated, but really nice to see it all the same, and something which will hopefully mix up AI races in the future. Unfortunately, as we're coming through the right hand here, I just get tyres on the grass, I spin out, I collide with the wall, taking my rear wing clean off, and then back across the track, and my race is over. Now this is a little bit of a sign to me that the AI is on just fundamentally different physics to the player, because we've seen AI cars go up on the grass and not spin out like that. So that is a bit of a concern, but nevertheless it's great to see the new damage model in action, and I did thoroughly enjoy driving that car. We're into race scenario 2 then. We're in the mini JCW at Oulton Park for a bit of a sprint race, so more like a modern club race than the classic formula cars we've just been driving. Firstly, to test out a front wheel drive car to see whether the tyre temperatures are simulated accurately for this kind of machine, but also just to see how the racing compares and whether we can get some door banging going on with the AI without it getting ridiculous. You can see already just on lap 2 here, we're down the inside of an AI car. We're going to try and make it stick into turn 1. He is trying to hold it out around my outside, but we are able to make that move. And what I would say from this race is, really encouragingly, you can see in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, the rear tyres are colder than our front tyres, and you would expect that in a front wheel drive car as we lose the car coming through the double right hander there. Encouragingly, I was able to hold that out of the barriers. I think in earlier builds of AMS2 the grass would have sent me into an uncontrollable slide, so that's quite nice to see that it seems as if that's been improved a little bit as we rejoin the track. But as I was saying, tyre temperatures for these front wheel drive cars do seem to be better simulated than they were, and the AI racing was really close and competitive. Generally speaking, the front wheel drive physics feel pretty authentic to me in these. This is probably one of the best cars that I've driven in the new build. Very, very enjoyable to race in, and you can actually get some of that off-throttle oversteer that you need in a front-wheel drive car to get it rotated and then get on the gas through the exit of the corner. That's very satisfying to see, and as I say, it feels pretty authentic overall. Oulton Park, fantastic circuit for these cars, as are the other British circuits in the game. So all in all, very enjoyable. For something then completely different, I thought I would hop into some of the newer content, the IndyCars and the oval racing. But as you can see up on screen, I've come up against a bug, and it's a bug that I couldn't get to stop happening at the Daytona tri-oval layout, where on the formation lap it was giving me penalties essentially, even though I was under AI control for passing cars. That would then give me a drive-through penalty as soon as I started the race. I didn't spend too long trying to fix this. I just turned penalties off and then was able to get a race underway. As you can see up on screen now, really ferocious sense of speed in these cars. The AI felt a little bit clumsy, if I'm honest, but then to be honest with you as well, oval racing is not really my thing, so this could be a Ben problem rather than an AMS2 problem. And as you can see, speaking of Ben problems, my race didn't last altogether that long in these cars, as I was up against the wall, made a big collision with another car, was sent off the circuit and then presumably straight to hospital. So, our fourth combination then, and this really is the main event. I wanted to test out what multi-class racing was like. I wanted to test out the day and night cycle. I also wanted to see what the real weather function looked like as well. So we're in the DPI, we've got a field of GTE cars as well at Watkins Glen for a 25-minute race, and we're going to see how these systems all work together and whether you can viably have a proper multi-class race on AMS2, because it's really important to see these systems actually work in action, because for me these are some of the big selling points of this sim over what you can do in other titles. First things first then, this car feels fantastic. It's got an unbelievable amount of power, but it's also got loads of downforce as well. So you're super quick down the straights. You've also then got that grip through the corners to really push the car and get huge exit speed as well. It's an exhilarating ride, as are a number of cars in AMS2. In my experience this week, it doesn't suffer with the snap oversteer or the kind of strange back end of some of the cars in AMS2 that we've seen over previous months and probably pretty much since the game first launched. Now that might be to do with it being a newer piece of content, or it may be to do with some of the improvements over the course of version 1.3 to 1.4. But as you can see up on screen, you can see we're getting into the night time now of this race. Obviously I'm running with accelerated time, so some of the transitions are just a little bit quicker than you would normally see. But we're into the pitch dark here, and we're also now going to get a sense of the weather system as well. Now, I didn't script this. This is real world weather data from the date that I was racing on, and it seems on this date in history at Watkins Glen there was a lot of rain through the night, and you can see it's coming down very quickly immediately, and we are going to aquaplane straight off the circuit. Now again, another hint that the player is not on the same physics as the AI, because although they were a bit slower, they did not struggle to simply keep the car on the circuit. It was unbelievably difficult, and I don't necessarily mind that, but it becomes a problem if it's only difficult for you. I was able to wrestle the car back to the pits, and things got better once we were all on the wet tyre, and I was able then to race competitively with the AI once more, but that potentially is something for Razor to look at. You can see then as we flashed forward to a bit later on in the race, a drying line has appeared as the rain has stopped, and you can see then the full effect of live track and the updates that have been made to that system as well. And as promised, different bits of the circuit have got different levels of moisture depending on the undulations of the track, or whether there are bridges crossing the circuit, things like that, and that is just so excellent to see, and it really does feel different in the handling as you go through different parts of the circuit. But the weather wouldn't stay dry for very long, so as I was just trying to get used to these sort of mixed conditions on track, it started raining again, and once more the circuit was absolutely flooded. And this is the real benefit, I think, of having the real world data, where you yourself are not having to set scripts, but actually you get realistic weather patterns crossing the circuit, and I just think that adds so much immersion and is game changing really for AMS2 compared to what other sims are able to offer. The handling feels pretty good in the wet weather. It's obviously got less grip than if you were running in the dry, but it doesn't feel necessarily excessive. You do have to work the wheel just a little bit harder. You have to be more careful on your downshifts and how quickly you're going into corners to try and get the front end pointed in. You can see I'm really struggling with that through this right-hander and then having to just wrestle away at the wheel, but I don't think that feels unrealistic or excessive, unlike perhaps in previous builds of the game where you would get that snap oversteer in the dry, never mind in the wet, and you'd be constantly wrestling with the rear of the car. There isn't much of that in this model at all, so that is really encouraging to see as well. And you can see now we're finally catching back up to some of the AI after aquaplaning off the circuit earlier in the race and losing all of those positions. So we're also going to get a chance to see in this race how the AI attack and defend in the wet, but also how they deal with back markers as well. You can see then we're a few minutes further on in the race once more, and again the weather has changed. It's stopped raining, but we've still got a load of standing water on the circuit. You can see the spray being kicked up onto my windscreen, so I've still got to have the wipers on to try and clear some of that and give myself the best view of the car up ahead to try then and make an overtake. As I'm now coming down the back straight, we're side by side heading into the right-hander. Who's going to be braver on the brakes, myself or the car on the outside? We've got the inside line. I'm able to get the car slowed down. Very tricky through that corner though, because a lot of standing water is gathered there, and you can feel the wheel go slightly light as you get through that part of the circuit. There may though be trouble ahead because we've now caught the GTE pack. How will the AI deal with that? Well, so far it seems not bad. Clearly they're losing a bit of time behind the GTE drivers. That will happen depending on what part of the circuit they get caught on. As you can see there, I also drifted wide into some of the wetter parts of the track and struggled for grip. But by and large the cars are making their way through. I'm trying to cool my tyres down here, by the way. Look at the graphic in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. My wet tyres, the rear tyres, are beginning to overheat. Here we go then past another set of GTE cars. I'm going to follow through on the AI driver here to just get up the inside, very risky up the S's, to make sure that I don't get collected or cause an accident myself, but we're all through safely there as well. So I would say this is pretty encouraging. It's definitely better than I've seen in previous builds. I'm sure it can be improved. I'm not sure any sim gets this done perfectly well. It's a very difficult thing to do. We've got more rain then as we get into the final part of this race, and you've got to remember that the cars are navigating wet weather as well as trying to overtake one another. So all in all, I think that gets a pass in these conditions anyway. On this circuit, I can't speak for how it is on every combination of every car class on every circuit, but for me, my experience of running this combination, it worked reasonably well, it seems, at least from what I could see. I haven't forensically gone back through the replay. Maybe, if I did, I would find that there were elements of immersion breaking behaviour from the AI. More battling then with the AI to come in this session before we get to the end of the race. You can see there I thought better of sticking one down the inside of the car up ahead. I'm going to try and get him through the S's here again. Very brave manoeuvre to go side by side with the AI, but in fairness, credit to the AI here. I'm running them on 100 difficulty. That's been the case across all 4 of these races, and on maximum aggression. And that seems to be a pretty good combination for me, at least. I haven't seen any wild or unreasonable behaviour as we're coming through on the final lap then, and we've caught another big pack of the GTE cars here. I'm going to try and make my way through them as best I can and maybe snatch an extra position or two as we get to the end of this race. Perfect timing here on the very final couple of corners to have hit this gaggle of cars. I'm going to be round the outside of the car on my inside there and then through onto the start-finish straight. I'm going to get one more GTE car. I'm not going to make up any more positions though, and that is a wrap on this race, and I've got to say hugely enjoyable. Not without flaws. We've seen that. We've seen some of the features are still a little bit rough around the edges and they need tweaking and calibrating a bit and refining a little bit. The big issue for me is working away on the AI, and then outside of that, because I'm primarily an online racer, on the online platform as well. I'm sure there are going to be further revisions and improvements to the physics and the force feedback. Both, to me at the moment at least, in the things that I've tried out, feel pretty well good enough. If not class leading, they're good enough to give you a decent racing experience. I'd want to see more done now to get the AI on similar physics, if not the same physics, as the player. I think that would do a lot to counter some of the immersion breaking moments, and a fully functioning ranked online platform. If Reza can pull those things off, then AMS2 really will be in a hugely strong position. I hope you've enjoyed this video, this rundown of the features and the racing on AMS2 version 1.4 point something. I've been really enjoying my time with the game. It remains a work in progress, but it's an enjoyable one to race on. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.